Good afternoon and welcome to the African American Heritage Committee's 30th year of this Black History Month program. The 2025 Black History Month theme is African Americans and Labor, which sets out to highlight and celebrate the potent impact of this work that Black people had for transformational throughout the United States, Africa, and the diaspora. The theme recognizes the diverse ways that Black people have worked, including voluntary and involuntary, skilled and unskilled labor. It also recognizes the role of Black people in community building, such as through social justice activism, voluntary work, and institutional building. The theme highlights how Black people's work has been central to their survival and empowerment. It also recognizes how Black people have fought for more rights for fair compensation through labor organizing and civil rights activism. The work Black people do and have done have been instrumental in shaping the lives, cultures, and history of Black people and the societies in which they live. Understanding Black labor and its impact in all these multivariate settings is integral to understanding Black people and their histories, lives, and cultures. This year marks the 100th year of the anniversary of the creation of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters and Maids by labor organizer and civil rights activist A. Philip Randolph, which was the first Black union to receive a charter in the American Federation of Labor. The theme, African Americans and Labor, intends to encourage broad reflections of intersections between Black people's work and their workplaces in all their iterations and key moments. Let us reflect and not forget that it is our stories not to be told but shared daily. Next, we will have the invocation by Mr. Ulysses Anderson, followed by the singing of the Negro National Anthem by Mr. Shannon Ellis, and then turning over to the moderator, Mr. Brahim Knight, in that order. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. We ask if everybody can rest on your feet. If you can, if you can't, we understand. All right. Let's bow our heads. Lord Jesus Christ, we thank you for this opportunity and this privilege to meet together to celebrate how you have brought African Americans through so many trials and tribulations. But you brought us out victorious, and we did not forget to praise your name for that. Lord God, we ask you to breathe upon every panelist, Lord God, and all those that have participated, that we would continue to uplift African Americans and everything they've done for the labor movement within this country, and let this department be an example to other state agencies. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
If you will, you can stand if you want to. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, our hearts drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand. Thou true, thy God, true to our native land.
All right. Mic check. Turn me up. Well, number one, I want to say thank you to Mr. Shannon Ellis. Can we hear it again for Shannon Ellis for that beautiful rendition of the Negro National Anthem? And as Yolanda just mentioned, my name is Brahim Knight. I'm the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer here at the New Jersey Department of Labor. And I'm just delighted to moderate this panel this afternoon. If I look down this table and see these panelists that we have together, and if you all would read their bios and just see their vast history, education-wise, work-wise, experience-wise, it is tremendous. So before I go down the table and ask each one of our panelists to introduce themselves, let's just give it up for our panelists for willing to participate in the program. So as I just mentioned, I don't want to take too much time reading their bios, but I'm just going to go down the line. If you all would, just introduce yourself to the audience here in the room and also on YouTube this afternoon. Go right ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Darcel Medley Stokes. I am the healthcare specialist for CWA Local 1038 in partnership with the Department of Labor. I'm also the Executive Board Secretary and the Human Rights Chairperson.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Badnam Honor, and I'm the Director of Career Services here at the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development, and I'm glad to be here with you this afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Robert Crowley. I come from the PROUD unit, Employer Accounts Status Unit, and I'm just thankful to be able to be here today to share with all the panelists what we think about black labor.
Good afternoon. My name is Amanish Robinson. I'm a 35-year employee of the New Jersey Department of Labor. I probably worked in almost every area of labor at one time. and I'm now one of the current directors in the Office of Finance and Accounting.
Good afternoon. Felicia Hobson. I'm the Assistant Director for the Division of Rehab.
Y'all can cheer louder now. Let's give it up for our panelists. A lot of names, a lot of titles, and a lot of work sitting at this table this afternoon. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and kick things off. So my first question for the panel is actually targeted to Dr. Crawley. Historical context around African Americans in labor is paramount. Where are we now with African Americans in labor currently, and where were we previously? Can you kind of describe that chasm from the past to now, and then the present? Go right ahead.
Thank you. When you talk about labor, black labor in this country, I would be remiss not to start from the very beginning. And I'm talking about 400 years of free labor, because we didn't always get paid for what we did. And that's critical to understand that. And even today, to be able to equate what that looks like financially in terms of actual dollars amount is hard to calculate, okay? But it's safe to say in the trillions of dollars. And I must say that that labor is responsible for some of the most important economic developments in this world, because there were many, many that benefited, not only America, France, Spain, Portugal, all should be around the table. I had an opportunity just recently to look at a book, to scan through it, called Unthinkable. And it was by a woman by the name of Amanda Ripley. And she talked about devastation, whether it was pandemic, whether it was like COVID, the brush fires, and all those kind of things, and also political kinds of unthinkable kinds of things. And she highlighted 3 areas, and that was denial, deliberation, and decisive moment. And right now, if those that were here last time we met, I said that we're in a situation, a crisis. Some believe that we're in a constitutional crisis right now. You don't have to believe me if you're watching any level of TV or reading any newspaper. We're in a crisis. And that's not just for black people, that's for everyone. And there are a lot of things that are beginning to come out. We have a tripartite government system, the executive, judicial, and legislative. It appears right now that the checks and balances that goes along with that are weakening severely as we speak. And I do feel like I have been in a sense, denial since the election. The important factors of the election, whether it was Roe versus Wade, whether it was the border, whether it was housing and food. But for me, even though those things are critically important, for me, that wasn't the highlight of what I felt about the election. My thought process lied in the fact, how do we maintain democracy? Democracy is important. And right now, our Congress has acquiesced. They're not making any sound decisions. The judiciary is struggling right now to preserve the rule of law. And so there is this concept that they call normalcy bias. And I want to read that into your hearing. What that means, normalcy bias, is defined as a cognitive bias which leads people to disbelieve or minimize threats or warnings, and a tendency to underestimate the likelihood of a potential problem based on the belief that things will continue as they have in the past. If you've been around the last 30 days, things are not like they were in the past. As an African American male, and you talk about labor, I know that we've always depended on the Constitution and the amendments to be able to have that level of inclusiveness. It's been threatened. Executive Order 11, I think it's 11246, Lyndon Johnson, 1964, Civil Rights Act, 65 and 68 were some critical years. And so as we approach labor, black labor right now, we have to think about it in the questions that are going to be answered here today. We have to think about that in the context of today. We've done some marvelous things, some beautiful things. And so what I decided to do was to take a desperate, not desperate in terms of, it's disparate look at where we've been from the 70s to right now. And I won't read all of these. I'll just give you some quick excerpts. Even after the Civil Rights Movement, unemployment for black workers remained double of that of white folks. And I took the time yesterday to look at what is it today in 25, and it's still double. And you don't have to believe me on any of this. Just go look it up. It's still double. Okay. Black workers were disproportionately concentrated in lower wage service jobs. We're talking about the 70s now. The deindustrialization hit black communities particularly hard as manufacturing jobs declined. Okay. Here is one that, when you talk about black labor, mass incarceration policies. When you put folk in jail in disproportionate numbers. I'm not saying that folks don't deserve to be there, but I know a lot of folks are there because they had a bag of marijuana, okay, which is now rampant in our community. People smoking like crazy. And so when we remove that breadwinning person, you do something to the family. The racial wage gap persisted even among workers similarly educated, meaning that we both could have the same kind of degree, but yet one group made more than another. And even right now today, African Americans on the job market still only make 78% of what other folks make. You don't have to believe me. Check it out. And as we moved into the 2000, 2010, the digital divide impacted labor. It created new barriers, transformed workplace. There was a time when people would say if you wanted to hide it from a black man, you put it in a book because it wasn't reading. And now, because there's so many households without computers, the level of learning that's necessary in the black community in terms of how it impacts black labor is lagging far behind. The digital divide is something very serious. And this is, just what I believe was about a couple, I'm gonna speed it up, about a couple months ago here at the department, we had a training on AI, which was, I thought was just fascinating. But AI is not new. It just didn't come about the last 3 or 4 weeks. They've been working on this piece for a very, very long time, okay? And check this out, this really blew my mind. Discrimination in hiring continued, with studies showing resumes with black-sounding names receive fewer callbacks. You don't have to believe me, you can look at it and find it. And I'm gonna fast forward to the 2000s to right now, and this really, really blew my mind because resumes are important. Discrimination in algorithmic hiring systems. AI can be trained. I don't know if you know that. Depends on the kind of prompts that you put in it. It can be trained, so whoever's inputting the information, if there's bias there, is going to come out in the selection process. Really doesn't have a whole lot to do with the programming of your resume. It has to do what the machinery does when it encounters a resume. And there were some gains, some losses. And as I said, I'm going to not go too far, but there was some increase in education. More folks had jobs, okay? The wage gap continued. And so when you talk about black labor, these things are critically important. And I'm hoping that as the questioning goes on today, that those kind of thought processes will come into play. Systemic barriers, all of those kind of things are still there. And so I'm going to kind of stop there. We've got pages of this stuff, and it's real. I want to say this. In 2021, black folks spent $1.6 trillion. So there is some money in the community, but where it's going, and does it really impact us in terms of the labor that it would produce? Not so sure about it. And so I'll leave you with this one statement. It was by a young lady. Her name was, she was Latina. Her name, last name was Rosas, and she has a business. And she said something her grandmother said to her. Tell me who are your friends, and I will tell you who you are. And so ally building is something that must happen in terms of increasing our force in the labor market.
Thank you, Dr. Crawley. I would like to just piggyback on some of Dr. Crawley's comments there with our next question. And our next question, Dr. Crawley, you address inclusive workplaces. You address disparities in hiring. My next question I will pose to Amanesh. What steps do you think people can take to not only prepare for their career, but at the same time, fight for fair and inclusive workplaces?
It's a hard man to follow right here, Dr. Crawley. So I think building, one of the things he said is building relations with other people. I was lucky to build relations with a lot of people in this room and throughout this building over the 35 years that I've worked here. I've worked in, I started off in TDI. In TDI, I had a great mentor, Dave Snow. Dave would talk to me about what I wanted to do throughout my career, what I wanted to get out of working in TDI and things like that. And when I looked and saw other promotions in other areas, he was one of the people who said, hey, go for it. And I ended up over in what is now ORI, but it was formerly Labor Planning Analysis. Worked there several years as a labor market analyst. Paul Tattery, who I was at NASWA with just last week, he was one of the supervisors then. He's now the deputy assistant commissioner there. So building those relationships and seeing the way Paul moved up, the way I moved up, is because of different relationships with different people and opportunity. And you gotta take the opportunity. There's an opportunity here for people to get training. You look at my training resume, it's probably like 40, 50 classes over there over the years. And then I also went to CPM. That was once I became a supervisor, so that helped out. And also, we have tuition reimbursement in this department. Take advantage of it. It's a great opportunity. When I worked in Division of Voc Rehab, I worked with folks who had master's degrees. I had a bachelor's. Tom Jennings was the director at the time. Tom said, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and get that master's. I went back and got an MBA. The state paid for it. They didn't pay for all of it, but they paid for a lot of it. So take that opportunity. Use those opportunities. Lean on a mentor. I had plenty of mentors, from Chuck Davis when he was the deputy commissioner here years ago. Paul Ewan when he was deputy commissioner. Use those people, you know. And use those and take those opportunities to further your career here.
Thank you, Amanesh. And I do want to just make a few comments on what you said, the idea of mentors and how valuable mentors are as we continue our careers, right, and our trajectory. Because a mentor's experience can really open us up to some ideas, some careers that we never really thought about or explored. They can also tell us about some of the barriers in those specific spaces that they work. But there's a flip side of the coin, and as I grow myself personally, but with some of the joys too, not just the barriers, but the joy of the work that they do each and every day. So I want to kind of uplift the idea of the joy that we get each and every day and not just the barriers that we face. I'd like to transition a little bit now to Dr. Hobson around the idea of mentors. How have mentors or role models help you navigate your career path?
A great deal. So I do believe that there's a difference between mentors and sponsors. So we do have to first identify the definition between the two. So in my opinion, your mentor is going to be there to help you along the way, every aspect of your career. Even if you no longer work with that mentor, they may still be at a previous job, they may have retired. Your mentor is going to help you. Hey, I just saw this. Do you think I should sign up for this training? Hey, I just met so-and-so. Do you think I should invite them to coffee? That's what your mentor is there for, and that mentor should be with you along the way to make sure you avoid pitfalls that they may have experienced or know someone who experienced. So the mentor is a very sacred relationship. The mentor is a sacred relationship that is built from a professional relationship that evolves into a more personal relationship. So that is a genuine connection with someone. Your sponsor is a transactional relationship, but we all need a sponsor. We all need a sponsor because your sponsor is going to be the one to help move the needle if you're presenting a new initiative, if you need support for a particular endeavor that you're working on. That sponsor is the one who's at that top level of the executive food chain, and you need for them to know your name. You need for them to understand your work ethic, and you need for them to be able to speak high regards about you when you are not in the room. Your mentor may not operate in those spaces. And we need to understand the difference between those two. So I think the mentor is there for you emotionally, right? They're there for you in ways that you'd be like, I can't believe I just did this. I can't believe I missed an opportunity. Your mentor is going to help you unpack that. Your sponsor's not. So be very clear when you think you have a mentor. If your mentor is moving like a sponsor, you have a sponsor. And that means you have to treat your sponsor differently. Your sponsor should always see you on your A game. They should always see you on your A game. And if you're having a bad day, you let them know you're having a bad day. You might need to get back to them, talk to them later. But your sponsor should always see you on your A game. So I think we need to make sure that we understand that, particularly if you're searching for someone who you want to occupy that space of mentor or sponsor. So as we are moving through our careers, I think folks need to pay attention, and you should have both. But start out with your mentor. But if you are in a place where you can identify a sponsor, make sure that that person knows that what your goals are. And they're not going to help you. Don't think that. That is not the role of a sponsor. The role of the sponsor is to help you along the way, but they're not going to move the needle unless you are really in front of the right people and you want to be able to say, oh, I met with Dr. Yarbrough. She heard my pitch. I wonder if I can run something else by her, right? And then what do? You ask for 30 minutes on her calendar, right? And then you shouldn't expect anything else from that meeting other than, yes, I think that's a good idea. No, I think you should do that. Because I don't think that we set our right expectations for ourselves. I think we over anticipate because, oh, I got in front of this person. Because you had a private audience with that person, you expect the world to come now. That's not how you still have to grind. You still have to hustle. And you have to just like, okay, I'm gonna redo this plan and try to meet with Dr. Yarbrough. And then I'm going to try to meet with the chief of staff. And then I'm going to try it. You understand what I mean? Like, you got to keep grinding. And your mentor should be there to help you figure out those steps. And then hopefully your sponsor will evolve from those type of connections that you're creating. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. And Dr. Hobson, the one thing that really resonated with me was this idea of preparation. Because what I'm hearing you saying is this idea of don't expect that from the sponsor, expect it of yourself first.
For sure.
So if you're able to prepare yourself and then it meets that opportunity, those doors really will be open.
And that therein lies the definition of success.
There we go. I see the synergy on the panel. I'm loving that this afternoon. I would like to transition a little bit to our representative here from CWA, our union representative. And this question is to Darcel. What role do unions play in addressing racial inequality in labor?
Well, in particular with CWA, Communications Workers of America, what many workers or employees in this building are members of CWA, and we always like to see, I know me in particular, encourage members to join. CWA is just not the union who represents you in bad times. There's a lot of things that CWA does. In particular, within CWA, we have a minority caucus, which many members don't know about, that address the needs of underrepresented members. In addition to that, over the years, they've also encouraged more recognition or representation on the National Executive Board. With that being said, something else that members also don't know, in 2023, CWA elected its first African-American president in Claude Cummings, and the Secretary Treasurer and Amina Salam, which is the top two positions in CWA. So that is a great step for CWA. So we heard you, and our members elected someone who they know would represent them. Number two, we have a amazing progressive national human rights committee whose job is to advocate, educate, and train. Particularly, I am, like I said earlier, the chair of the Human Rights Committee. Brahim, I brought him along with me. He is also a member of the Human Rights Committee, and we attended a great conference in Houston, Texas. And their job is pretty much to increase grassroots activities and have more community representation. And with that being said, we support events such as this cultural event so that the trailblazers of the Department of Labor can be highlighted. We have a chief of staff who is a woman of color who is amazing. We have an assistant commissioner in Ebony Gibson who is amazing as well. And like I said, what was discussed earlier, we have many people of color who has paved the way within the Department of Labor, and that is our job, to highlight those individuals, and if they can do it, we can do it as well.
Thank you, Darcel. And that conference was amazing, and it allowed me to look at CWA through a different lens. I didn't know anything about the human rights component, and they are advocates of human rights. It's just amazing the work that they do. Our next question, I want to pose this question to, excuse me one second here, Baden. What advice would you give to high school students preparing to enter the workforce?
Okay, I think that the landscape has changed, so much so that it's much different than it's ever been in the past. There were certain positions in the past that were always there, right, that people would think to themselves, well, you know what, I could always fall back on. That's changing. I don't know how many of you know this, but I know even Uber drivers. I'm sure if we were to ask how many of you all know someone that actually does that on the side. Believe it or not, there are actually automated cars now, driverless, in San Francisco that are on the streets that basically someone can go on their phone, set it up, pay for it over the phone. It'll come pick them up, take them to where they're going, and you will never have to be in contact with a human being. There are fast food restaurants. There's McDonald's now in Texas, where, again, completely automated. There are no people working there at all. The only thing that people do is basically deliveries and make sure that it's stocked. And the whole operation is automated. And certainly I can go on and on. Even, I know with the Department of Labor, we actually sent a lot of people to training for CDL drivers. But now in Texas and Colorado, there are driverless semi trucks as well, even 18-wheelers that actually do deliveries. And again, no person at all. So you don't have to worry about a book or anybody falling asleep behind the wheel or anything like that. You might have to worry about some other things, but not that anyway. So I say all this to say that I think that the things maybe that worked in the past won't necessarily work in the future. And I know that, you know, I'm sure all of you have heard this before, and some people may think it's cliche, but you know, if you actually find something that you love, right, then you're never working a day in your life. I think that's especially true now, that it's important for young people especially to experiment, to try different things, to do an internship, to get experience, valuable experience, even if you're not getting paid. The experience in itself is going to be worthwhile. Because I think it's just as important to know what you want to do as what you don't want to do, right? I know certainly in my life, I worked a number of different jobs earlier in my career, and that helped me to get to where I am now because it made me realize what I didn't want to do, what I didn't like, right? And I think that that's very important as well. And so certainly as far as advice, I'd say there are great interest inventories that are out there. So if someone really does have no clue at all what it is that they want to do, I highly recommend that to actually take an interest inventory and get an idea of where at least their interest lies, and then from there to pursue it. And the thing is not to think that you're pigeonholed into something simply because you made a decision, right? When you took an interest inventory or you went on a certain track in high school. I would say that experience is the best teacher, and you should experiment as much as possible. And certainly I could get into specific fields that are in demand now. But again, I think with the advent of AI and some of the changes that we're seeing, I think that's fluid. The things that we see now that are actually in demand, I'm not so sure that they're going to be in demand in 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So I think that if you continue to actually build yourself, right, so that you know yourself better, that you're actually, whatever it is that whatever direction you end up going in, you're more prepared for whatever it is that comes your way, I think you're better off. Versus someone telling you, well, you know what, you should prepare for this specific field. And then I strongly believe, and certainly evidence suggests, that there's a chance that that field may not look like it looks like now.
Thank you, Biden. And I want to just highlight a point that you made. I mean, look no further than what's going on in the United States of America. People losing their jobs within the federal government. To your point that things are changing and things have changed. If you have another skill set that you can fall back on, right? When somebody hands you that pink slip, you can hand somebody else your resume and an application. So to your point, I think we all need to be cognizant of how things are changing within the workforce and then within that dynamic, and we can diversify our offering to meet a multitude of different career paths. So excellent point there. I would like to ask the next question. I know our time, we're kind of bumping up a little bit here, but to Dr. Crawley, as Biden was just talking about kind of like personal journey and experiences, can you share, Dr. Crawley, your personal journey or experiences in the workforce as an African American and how that may have shaped your perspective of the world today?
Yes, I can. My first job was with a guy named Hewitt. He was a landscaper, and we worked hard. And I learned right then and there, I didn't want to do that. That pointed me in the right direction real quick, because when it rained, we didn't get paid. No paper. But, you know, my experience, you know, comes from, you know, my mother, who was a great woman. She was a community action program director back in the late 60s and 70s. And I was inspired, you know, by her and what she did and her selflessness, and still had dinner done at 5 o'clock. Very serious woman, you know. And one of the things that, you know, really sticks out in my mind is that some of the opportunity that she could have had, she didn't. But the biggest thing, it may seem funny to some of you, I grew up playing Major League Football, and this back in Long Island. And all of the coaches, they had nice cars, they had girlfriends, they had jobs, and they played ball. And I decided at that age, I got to go to school because I want to play. And that's what really got me involved in education, period, to go and play ball. And it was my junior year at Colgate when I talked to the guidance counselor and I says, how many credits do I need? But you know, I didn't go there to get an education, I wanted to play ball. And he says to me, Rob, you have about a semester left. I said, daggone, I can get a degree out of this thing? You know, so it was that kind of experience for me, you know. So I love work and I love my road that I've traveled.
Thank you, Dr. Crawley. I would like to open it up to any other panelists who would like to kind of just share your personal journey in the workforce as an African American. How's that has shaped your perspective of the world today?
I'll share. I think when I first started out in my career, I was working on my master's degree. And it's very important for the women in the room, particularly the women of color, because I was in a predominantly white organization. I was in an IT organization. And my first boss was younger than I was, male, privileged, and racist. And I don't think we prepare for that, particularly as women and women of color. We prepare for everything else coming out of school and your certification programs, and your mom, your mentor, whomever may tell you, be polite, find someone to have lunch with in the lunchroom, whatever the case may be. But no one tells you how to deal with racism towards you directly. That's a very heavy thing for a young woman starting out her career to have to deal with. And that's the first thing that hit me when I started in my career. It was racism. And I was being left off of projects. He wasn't allowing me to grow my skill set. And one person spoke up for me. He said, well, because, the boss was putting so many other projects on the other team members because he wouldn't allow me to help. So it was like, well, why do we have so much work to do if you have this person here? Why aren't you letting her help? He never gave an answer. So finally, luckily for all of us, he had moved on to another position, and then we got a new boss. And I expressed my concerns to the new boss right away, and things had changed. But, a year later, I see him because I'm still with the same organization, and now he's talking to me like we're best friends. And I couldn't understand it. I'm like, well, what is happening? Right? You didn't know me. You passed judgment on me. And that kind of set with me for a couple of years as a black girl, short, spiky hair, long nails. We always deal with judgment. We always deal with preconceived notions. So it's very heavy. And I was always comfortable in my own skin. So it wasn't about me questioning who I was, how I looked. It was questioning, why don't you see me for my skill set and allow me to grow in this position to help our team with productivity and performance and making sure we deliver outcomes and all of these things. Why are you hindering the team because you have a bias? Deal with your ish and let us get to work. So, and I was able to say that to the new boss in a nicer way, but it definitely sat with me for a few years, and I'm upset that it took me so long to get through that, because I should have moved on, found another employer, so forth and so on. But it's a life lesson now.
Dr. Hobson, thank you so much. I just want to share a quote with the room from Shirley Chisholm. To your point, we must reject not only the stereotypes that others hold of us, but also the stereotype that we hold of ourselves. And I think you kind of outlined in navigation how you navigated through that, and being bombarded with that at a young age. Maybe not having a coping skill to deal with racism. I've experienced that myself as a young pharmacist at a point in time, so I could definitely relate. I saw Darcel ready to jump in. Go right ahead, Darcel. Sorry about that.
Well, for me in particular, is I guess similar, not blatant. I come from generational government workers. I think some of us have been through that. My mom worked for DHS for 35 years before she retired, was an executive board member of AFSCME, and look at me here, right? But my mom wasn't college educated. However, my mom always told me to keep your composure and know what you're talking about. So when I'm in front of people, in this place, or not in this place in particular, but just in a professional, before I start, because I had leadership roles in college, senior class president and things, and back then I was young and I didn't care about how I presented myself with you did something, that's not, so I grew up. I grew up. So now in this place, when I'm in a professional setting, I always read and know what I'm talking about. If it's in writing, it's there. I know what I'm talking about, and that's what I say, I guess, to the younger generation who's just coming in. I know I look young, right? I'm young. I am young, but I've been working for the state for 18 years. When you come in and you have these positions, know what you're talking about. Reading is fundamental. Know what you're talking about. And when you know what you're talking about, when you read policy and procedure, I came from DCF, that's what we had to know. No one can question that or go against that when it's in writing. So just know what you're talking about, dress the part, keep your composure.
Thank you, Darcel. I just want to get a read on our time in the back. How are we on time back there? Good to go? Okay. All right, sounds good, sounds good. I wanted to go back to that question around high school students. And a little fact that I pulled out. So in New Jersey, the black high school graduation rate is 89.56% as of 2024. I'm going to personalize this a little bit from the town that I'm from. However, I didn't go to public school there. In Camden, New Jersey, all right, no doubt, Whitman Park, I would say something else, but we're live. In Camden, New Jersey, the graduation rate between 2011 and 2012 was 49%. If we transition to 2022 to 2023, the graduation rate was 64.7%. As I mentioned early on, looking at some progress, not just looking at barriers. But as it relates to predominantly African-American communities and our youth, and we think about the idea of them now engaging into the labor, into the workforce, because after all, we are the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development. What are some thoughts to our panelists today of how to prepare our youth, specifically our black youth, that come from these challenging backgrounds, to equip them with the skill sets, the etiquette, the knowledge, to actually not only go into a position and role, but to sustain that role? That's a kind of loaded question, but I would like to throw that out there.
I think we need to introduce them to more things than just college. Trade school needs to be right there. And in fact, it probably needs to be a duo. My son went to college, didn't like college, then went to trade school. Now he's a plumber and loves it. Picked the dirtiest trade, but he loves it. But now he's talking about going back to college. But I think we don't present enough opportunity. And even when they go to college, if they're failing, how do we help them? Because I think that's part of the problem, right? A lot of high school students don't go to college because they don't know who's going to be there to help them. And I know I had reservation initially. I went to school. I'm from New Jersey. I'm from North Jersey, but I went to school in the South. I didn't know anybody. My cousin, but I saw her hardly ever, right? So I didn't know anybody. And I was at an HBCU, and you know the story about HBCUs. You're just like an extended family, but you still don't know anybody. So you have to learn how to navigate life. So as a high school student, when you're trying to learn how to navigate life, I was just having this conversation with a team member yesterday. You know, we as the adult, rely on the student to say, well, what do you want to do? You should know by now. I'm sorry, if you're 17 years old, you should not know what you want to do, because 10 years ago, you were only 7. Parents, be mindful of that. So I think we put too much pressure on our young adults. So we need to help them, guide them along the way. So I don't think they stop needing us until they're in their late 20s. That's just my opinion. Because life is life and all the time. So if we think that it stops at 18, 19, 20, 21, just because you graduated college, we are sadly wrong as the adult in that scenario. So I think we have to figure out ways to help them in more ways than just your traditional, go to college, find something you like and major in it, graduate with that degree and find a job in that realm. We also have to say, okay, well, maybe you should think about taking some certifications. Maybe you should learn a trade if you're going to take a semester off to go to trade school or learn something else. What about cybersecurity? I don't think we give them enough options. So it is my hope that, we will start to do that when we're talking to our youth, is give them more options, and then don't leave them with the options. Guide them along the way.
Thank you, Dr. Hobson. Because, after all, that's the next iteration of the people in the room today, right? The high school students. So I wanted to bring that question to the forefront. Would anybody else like to address the high school student question? Dr. Crawley, I will just open it up to the floor. You sound like you want to address the audience, so go right ahead.
I go off on a limb with this. Those two guys right there, stop for 1 second. I just want you to hear something. We talked about allies and ally building and what that means, you know, to the cause. I'm putting on the table right now that next year, Black History Month, we need to have a white male up here or a white woman up here to talk about what they know and what they see about Black history. Just like McDonald's said, Black history is 365 days a year. We live with each other. We work together. And if we're really true about ally building, I think that should come under consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Crawley. If y'all had to go, I guess y'all could go now. He stopped y'all like that. But we're about to close out. Before we close out, just a couple of acknowledgments. I do want to acknowledge Assistant Commissioner Yarborough. We have our Chief of Staff, Kim Walker. We have our Deputy Commissioner Diaz over here. A.C. Gibson was here for some time in the back. And I also want to just thank the African American Heritage Committee here at the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development. And I also want to thank the New Jersey Department of Labor. I want to thank the New Jersey Department of Labor for, number one, continuing to have events like this, continuing to have D&I training. It's so important. And I just love the commitment in this space that our organization has made to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And thank you all in attendance today. So with that, I'll close out, and I hope everybody enjoys the food in the back. Happy Black History Month.